It was supposed to be a quiet return to Karnapur, a village where days moved slowly and the nights were filled with crickets and the smell of earth. But one evening, walking near the sugarcane fields, I heard it, a sound that didn't belong, a high-pitched cry, desperate, sharp, and small. I followed it, and there she was, Tara. Just skin and bones, lying half buried in dust, her flesh crawling with hundreds of gnawing maggots. I felt my stomach twist. Maya ran over, her hands trembling. In that moment, I didn't know we were about to uncover something far worse than one puppy's pain. The air was thick with the smell of rot and dust, the kind of odor that clings to the inside of your nose and refuses to let go. I crouched beside her, not sure whether I was more horrified or heartbroken. Her tiny body shuddered with every weak breath, ribs rising like thin branches under stretched skin, and around her tail and hind legs, the flesh seemed to pulse with movement. Not life, but infestation. The maggots writhed in slow, greedy waves, devouring her while she still whimpered through the pain. Maya arrived seconds later, breathless, her skirt dragging in the dirt, eyes wide with panic and something deeper, fury, maybe, or grief. She didn't say a word as she pulled out a piece of cloth from her satchel and gently wrapped it around the bleeding pup, careful not to crush what little strength she had left. Neil, my nephew, stood a few feet away, silent, filming with trembling hands. He was always filming, always trying to document what he said people refused to see. We didn't know where the others had gone, but the field showed signs, shallow holes, paw prints, tufts. Maya's courtyard had become a place of improvised healing, littered with old cushions, cracked ceramic bowls filled with boiled water, and rags that had seen better days. We laid Tara on a worn blanket near the shaded wall, and for the first time I saw her eyes open fully. Dull, clouded, but flickering with something too stubborn to name. The maggots took hours to remove. Maya worked in silence, flushing the wounds with turmeric water and betadine, her fingers gentle but quick, trained by years of necessity rather than formal schooling. Tara didn't fight. She didn't have the strength. She just lay there, trusting or maybe resigned, a broken little soul who hadn't given up the will to cry. I knelt beside her the whole time, pressing my palm softly against her side, trying to offer whatever warmth I could. Burra appeared later that afternoon, as he often did, limping at the edge of the courtyard with his one good eye watching us like an old sentinel. He never came close, but his presence was felt, especially by Tara, who lifted her head ever so slightly when she sensed him. Kali came 2 days later, snarling from the street, teeth bared, tail rigid. She was injured too, a long welt across her shoulder that looked like a lash, and it was Neil who coaxed her with a boiled egg and a soft whisper, though she never took her eyes off him. Each dog arrived like a fragment of some larger invisible story, their behavior revealing things no words ever could. And with every new arrival, we began to disagree, not about their care, but their future. Maya wanted to keep them, to build something permanent. Rajiv, the elder down the road, warned us we were interfering with nature, that the dogs would turn on us. Even I wasn't sure what we were doing, rescuing or dragging them into something worse, of matted fur. Something terrible had happened here, and this puppy was the only one left behind. As we walked back toward Maya's home, Tara's whimpers echoed in my head like a broken lullaby. I didn't realize it yet, but this wasn't just a rescue. It was a warning. Something was broken in Karnapur, and we were only beginning to see the cracks. On the 6th night, the coughing started. At first, we thought it was just exhaustion or maybe the aftermath of infection, but Tara's breaths began to rattle, her tiny chest rising with a sickly rhythm that sounded like water in her lungs. Maya pressed her ear against the pup's side, her hands shaking ever so slightly. She didn't say anything, but I saw the change in her eyes, a flicker of panic that she tried to hide beneath determination. We wrapped Tara in a fresh cloth and rushed her to the one veterinary outpost 3 villages away, a crumbling single-room structure with rusted shelves and a sleepy vet who reeked of pon and gave half answers. He looked at Tara, sighed, and whispered words that tasted like dread. Lung rot, septic shock, no guarantee. But it wasn't just the diagnosis that rattled us, it was what came next. While Maya tried to argue for antibiotics we couldn't afford, I wandered behind the clinic and stumbled into something I still struggle to explain. A holding pen, filthy, tucked behind broken fencing, where a dozen dogs sat in silence, emaciated, trembling, eyes hollow. Some had wounds that looked eerily familiar. The vet, seeing me there, simply shrugged. They come in, sometimes from farmers. We keep the ones that can still breed. That sentence stayed with me like a bruise on my chest. The rescue we thought we were leading wasn't unique. It was part of a system. And Tara, she may not have been the first to suffer this way. She just happened to scream the loudest. Back in Karnapur, the silence between us thickened. Maya stopped speaking for an entire day, not out of anger, but because words felt insufficient for what we had seen. She moved like someone haunted, tending to Tara with a tenderness that bordered on desperation, as if keeping this one life breathing might balance out the horror behind that clinic wall. Neil, always behind his camera, stopped filming. He sat with his chin resting on his knees, the lens cap still on, staring at the dogs like he was trying to memorize them, afraid they'd disappear if he blinked. I tried to speak with Rajiv, hoping for some kind of guidance or at least validation, but all he offered was a tired scoff. "You think this is new? Boy, this has always been happening. You just never looked before." His words landed like a slap. I wanted to scream at him, to demand how he could stand by knowing all this, but somewhere deep inside I understood. Ignorance isn't always born of cruelty. Sometimes it's the armor people wear when they feel powerless. Meanwhile, Burra stayed just beyond the gate, guarding us like a ghost that refused to step into the light. Kali had begun to soften, inching closer when Maya wasn't looking, drawn to the scent of cooked rice and gentler days. The dogs sensed something shifting, and so did we. The question wasn't just how to help them now, but whether we had the strength to face what helping them truly meant. Word began to spread, slowly at first, like whispers carried by the wind between clay rooftops and chai stalls. At the village well, I overheard mothers muttering about sickness, about how dogs shouldn't be kept so close to homes. Someone said they'd seen Neil filming near the cattle sheds, and now feared he was inviting bad spirits with his device. Old men in white dhotis wagged their heads as we passed, and children who once ran to greet us began to keep their distance. The tension wasn't loud. It crept in like dampness, soaking into everything quietly. Then the first letter came, folded neatly and slipped under Maya's gate, written in rough ink with no signature. "This is not your place. You are putting the village at risk. Send them away." Maya didn't flinch when she read it, but I saw the way her hands clenched, her knuckles white and trembling. She burned it without saying a word, but that night, she barricaded the courtyard gate with a rusted bicycle and an old stool. Around the same time, food started disappearing. Bowls we left for the dogs were overturned, and once, we found Burra bleeding from a wound that looked like it came from a slingshot. The sense of safety we built in that small space began to erode, one brick at a time. It was clear now, we weren't just fighting for the dogs. We were standing against something larger, older, and far more stubborn than we had ever expected. Fear dressed up as tradition. There were nights I couldn't sleep, not from fear, but from the gnawing thought that maybe we were making it worse. Tara's condition stabilized, but she didn't thrive. She ate little, whimpered in her sleep, and sometimes stared into the distance as if seeing something we couldn't. Kali still growled at every sudden movement, and Burra limped a little heavier with each passing day. I began to wonder, were we saving them or just prolonging their suffering for our own sense of virtue? Maya rarely left the courtyard anymore. She fed them, cleaned their wounds, whispered names to each one like they were her children. But I could see the exhaustion in her. Not physical, emotional. She had begun to imagine futures for them, stories where they lived safe, long lives, and I feared what it would do to her if those futures never arrived. One evening, as I sat with Neil watching Tara sleep, he asked, "Do you think she'd be better off if we hadn't found her?" I had no answer. Not because I didn't care, but because I cared too much. And that's the thing they don't tell you about rescue. It's not always about what you're willing to give. Sometimes it's about what you're willing to lose. It happened just before dawn, when the sky was still the color of ash and the village roosters hadn't yet cried. Burra was gone. The courtyard gate had been forced open, quietly, without splintering wood or scattered nails. just unlatched and left swinging like a door someone forgot to close. There was no blood, no signs of a fight, only his worn blanket left crumpled in the corner, still warm to the touch when I found it. We searched the fields, the temple steps, the riverbank where he sometimes drank. Nothing. No prints, no sound. Maya didn't cry, not immediately. She simply sat by the gate, stroking the latch with her thumb as if trying to read its story. Later that day, Neil showed me footage from 2 nights earlier. Grainy, shaky, filmed through the window near the kitchen. It captured a figure standing across the road, just outside the reach of the lantern light. A man. Tall, wearing a scarf over his face, watching the courtyard, watching the dogs. It became clear that this wasn't just villagers spooked by rumors. Someone was actively watching us, waiting for something. And maybe Burra hadn't wandered off. Maybe he'd been taken. The idea lodged in my chest like a thorn. Who would want an old, injured street dog? And why now? Maya finally spoke that evening. Just one sentence, quiet and heavy. They're not scared of the dogs, they're scared of what we'll find next. And in that moment, I understood. This rescue wasn't just unwanted, it was dangerous. Kali was the first to change. She began following Maya from room to room, her once snarling presence now replaced by a quiet, protective shadow. She still flinched at sudden sounds and wouldn't let anyone else touch her, but at night, she curled at Maya's feet like she belonged there. Tara, too, had shifted. She had stopped whimpering in her sleep, and though she rarely barked, she'd begun lifting her head when Neil entered the room, watching him with those slow, calculating eyes, as if trying to remember a life that didn't begin in blood and fear. We built a makeshift pen using old crates and woven palm mats so they could wander a bit more freely. The courtyard, once a place of triage, was slowly transforming into a home. But with that comfort came the inevitable weight of deeper questions. Neil began editing footage in secret, putting together a short video he hoped to share online, hoping exposure might help, or at least warn others. Maya didn't stop him, but I could see her fear. What if showing the truth made us targets? What if Burra's disappearance was a message? Rajiv, surprisingly, began showing up with scraps. Roti, leftover dal, even a blanket one morning. He never stayed long, never looked the dogs in the eye, but something had shifted. Perhaps it was guilt, perhaps memory. He once mumbled something about a dog he had as a child, one that vanished during a drought, never to be spoken of again. We were changing too. This wasn't about rescue anymore. It was about belonging, about restoring something in ourselves as much as in the animals. But deep down, none of us could answer the question that hovered in every moment of peace. How long could it last before everything collapsed again? The ultimatum came not through violence, but through bureaucracy. A folded piece of paper, stamped by the local panchayat office, handed to Maya by a trembling delivery boy who wouldn't meet her gaze. It cited unsanitary conditions, community concern, and potential threat to livestock. We had 7 days to remove the dogs or face fines, possibly eviction. No hearings, no arguments, just a silent verdict handed down from people who had never once set foot inside the courtyard, never once looked into Tara's tired, flickering eyes. Maya read it without flinching, but I saw her lips move slightly as she read, as if reciting a prayer or swallowing a scream. Neil stormed off to find Rajiv, hoping he might intervene or offer advice, but the old man just shook his head slowly. They don't care about the dogs. They care about what you've stirred up. We gathered that evening around the small fire pit in the courtyard, the dogs scattered nearby, unaware that their fate was being written again. I looked at Maya, at Neil, and finally at the animals who had come to trust us in ways I wasn't sure we deserved. The question sat in the air like smoke. Do we fight or do we let them go? Tara lay curled beneath Maya's shawl, her breathing shallow but steady, and Kali paced along the courtyard wall as if she could sense the threat approaching. Every instinct in me wanted to resist, to dig in and hold the line, but I couldn't shake the thought. What if keeping them meant endangering them more? That night, none of us slept. The village was quiet, but it was the kind of quiet that feels like breath being held. The next move would decide everything, and the weight of it sat heavy in all of our chests. By morning, the courtyard had lost its stillness. The air buzzed with tension, unspoken, thick, a presence that pressed against our skin like humidity before a storm. Maya stood at the center, barefoot, sleeves rolled up, preparing food for the dogs as if everything were normal. But it wasn't. Neil sat nearby, silent, his laptop open to a paused frame of Tara licking Kali's scarred face, a moment so soft, so impossible it hurt to look at. He had uploaded the first version of his film during the night, 5 minutes long, no narration, just images, wounds, silence, and eyes. Raw truth. By noon, the views had begun to climb, a few hundred, then thousands. Comments from strangers began pouring in, some offering help, others begging for updates. One woman from Bangalore offered to take Tara. A retired vet in Kerala promised medicine if we could get it to him. Hope, once a flickering candle, now burned just a bit brighter. But Rajiv came again that afternoon, not with food this time, but with a warning. They know about the video. They're not pleased. You're exposing them, and you're doing it loudly. His eyes didn't hold anger, just fear. For us, for the dogs, maybe even for something he couldn't name. We were out of time. Maya turned to me that night, her voice low, steady. If we stay, we fight. But if we move them, we might save them. We can't have both. It was the line we'd all been avoiding. The choice between resistance and escape. Keeping the dogs meant bringing the fight to our doorstep. Letting them go meant risking they'd never survive out there, or worse, be taken again. And so the night fell heavy once more, cloaking us in indecision. But by dawn, something would have to give. The next morning broke like a bruise, gray, swollen, and quiet in the wrong kind of way. The village felt paused. No vendors called out. No footsteps echoed down the main path. Even the dogs were still gathered near the gate, sensing what we hadn't yet spoken aloud. Maya had packed a small bundle, some medical supplies, Tara's cloth blanket, 2 cans of rice mash, and placed it by the doorway, her silence louder than any argument we could have had. We'd made contact with a woman named Veena, someone from a rescue network down south who'd seen Neil's video and sent a message just before dawn. She could take in 3 dogs immediately, maybe more in a few days. But the problem wasn't space, it was time. The authorities were planning a formal inspection, something that rarely happened unless someone had pushed for it. We all knew what that meant. We'd embarrassed someone with influence. And in villages like ours, shame breeds consequences. The plan was forming, fragile and incomplete. Veena's friend would come with a van, but it had to be that night. No lights, no noise, no witnesses. We would take Tara, Kali, and 2 others if possible. Burra was still missing. Every effort to find him had turned up nothing but locked doors and eyes that looked away too quickly. We'd begun to suspect the truth, that he had been made an example. Tara lay curled in Maya's arms, lighter than she should have been, but calm. Kali stood at the gate, ears perked, body rigid, like she was waiting for something or someone. Neil hadn't spoken in hours. He just sat with his camera on his lap, no longer filming, just watching. Everything we'd built hung by a thread, and that night we would either save them or lose everything trying. The van came just after midnight, headlights off, engine rumbling low like a nervous heartbeat. Veena's friend, a wiry man named Ashok with deep lines on his face and a voice rough from too many cigarettes, stepped out and didn't waste time. Quick, get them in. We can't stop long. No greetings, no questions, just purpose. Maya had already wrapped Tara in her shawl, her fingers trembling against the pup's fragile frame. Neil carried Kali with surprising ease, whispering to her in a voice so soft it nearly broke me. The other 2 dogs, newer rescues we hadn't even named yet, were led by makeshift leashes, reluctant but trusting. Ashok opened the rear hatch. Inside was a crude crate system built into the van's shell, metal cages softened by blankets and old cloth. One by one, the dogs were placed inside, their eyes wide and silent, unsure of what waited but too tired to resist. Maya lingered as Tara was taken from her arms. Her body leaned forward even after the crate door was locked, fingers brushing the air where the puppy had just been. And for a moment I thought she wouldn't let go. But she did. Kali stared through the bars, unblinking, and I swore, just for a second, that she knew, that she understood, that we weren't abandoning them, but giving them a chance. A real one. As the van pulled away, its taillights swallowed by the dark road, no one spoke. We just stood there, 3 shadows beneath the neem tree, hearts hollowed out and full all at once. We didn't know where the road would take them. We didn't know what would happen next. But for the first time in weeks, the night didn't feel cruel. It felt still. like maybe, just maybe, we'd done enough. The courtyard feels quieter now, though the silence is a different kind. It no longer aches, it breathes. The bowls still sit in their usual place, empty but clean. The gates are kept shut, not out of fear but respect. And every now and then, we still catch glimpses. Paw prints in the mud after rain, a bark in the distance that sounds too familiar, a shadow that moves just like Kali used to. Whether it's memory or something more, we don't question it. Veena sends updates when she can. Tara is eating on her own. Kali has begun allowing strangers to touch her. The nameless pups have names now, Mira and Sham, and someone is considering adopting both together. Burra was never found. And maybe that's the truth about rescue. Sometimes, not every ending is whole. Not every thread ties itself neatly, but even the frayed ones have meaning. Maya has started teaching village kids about animal care. Neil is working on a longer film, one that tells the full story, names and all. As for me, I still walk the fields at dusk, where I first heard Tara's scream. Only now I listen for something else. Not cries, but the quiet that comes when a life has been changed. This isn't the end. Not for the dogs, not for us. It's just a pause in the story. And if you've made it this far, you are part of it now too. If this story stirred something in you, share it. Let others hear Tara's voice. Subscribe for more stories like this, because rescue doesn't end with saving a life. It begins with telling their truth.